Hi everyone, in this video we'll learn the difference between advice and advice, and this is a question that we have got several times on our social media pages, so that's what we'll understand in this video. Now the first thing that we need to remember is that they have different spellings as well as pronunciations. Advice is ADVICE and it's pronounced as advice, sir. Advise is ADVISE and it's pronounced as advise. So sir and the, these are the different sounds that come from these two different words. Now the only thing that you need to remember while trying to understand the difference between these two words is that advice with a C and a sir sound is a noun, and advise with an S and a Z sound is a verb. So advice is a noun, advise is a verb. And what's a verb? An action word is called a verb. And if you remember, these action words have different forms, right? So advise can have forms like advised or can be advising. Because advise is a verb, so we can say advised, which is the past form of this verb. We can also say advising, which is the ing form of this verb. Now please note that advising is wrong. Why? Because advice is not a verb, right? So we can never say advising, we can never say advised. All these are wrong. The only form of advice, ADVICE, is advice, while advise can have different forms. We can have advised or we can have advising. Now let's look at these two examples. My father gave some advice about my career. The same sentence can be said as my father advised about my career. Again, what's the difference between these two sentences? In the first sentence, we are using advice, which is a noun, and that's why we are saying my father gave some advice. In the second sentence, we are using advise, which is a verb, and that's why we can say advised because we are talking about the past. With the word advice, which is a noun, we make three major types of sentences. One is we give advice, we take advice, and the last one is we ask for advice. Some examples would be I asked for some advice from my father. Another example would be my father gave me some advice. And the last one would be I took some advice from my father. Now the same situation has been said in these three different ways, and that's how you can use the word advice. One tip that you need to remember when you use the word advice is that this word is uncountable. We cannot count advice. We cannot say one advice, two advices, three advices. That thing is wrong. That's why we can never use an advice. An advice is wrong. Why? The reason is that an means one, and that's why we can never say an advice. You can always say some advice because advice cannot be counted. But let's take an example. Suppose somebody actually gave you two different suggestions and you want to use the word advice. How would you say that? In that case, you can say somebody gave me two pieces of advice. Okay, so you can use the word piece or pieces to make something sound countable or to make something countable. Another example would be furniture is a word that is uncountable. Furniture cannot be counted. You cannot say I bought two furnitures. That is wrong. So you have to say I bought two pieces of furniture. That statement would be correct. Now we hope the difference is clear to you. If it's not clear yet, then please write in the comments your doubts and we'll answer them. If the difference is clear to you, why don't you make sentences, two sentences in fact, with advice and advice. I would like all of you to make the first sentence with advice and convert the same sentence using advise. Now before going, this is one last thing that I would like you to remember, which is the difference between effect and affect is the same as the difference between advice and advise, and the difference is that effect is a noun in this case and affect is a verb. So you can say affecting or affected because affect is a verb, but you can never say affecting or affected. These two words are wrong.